Hello, and welcome to the Rainbow Rights Podcast. I am Michael, and I'm here with Daniela, Megan, Sarah, and Julia. Today, we are going to be talking about various issues that are affecting the LGBTQ plus community, specifically transgender individuals. We will examine how various policies have been implemented over the years, as well as under our current administration, have affected transgender individuals. Over the last few decades, many strides towards equality have been made. However, under our current administration, policies that are meant to protect queer and trans individuals are actively being removed. It is our hope that by discussing these issues, we bring awareness to how our administration is adversely affecting our community and its members. First up, we have Daniela talking about LGBTQ rights in school.
Currently, LGBTQ people and culture are being actively removed from mainstream media. It is more important now that more than ever to have discussions about gender and sexual identity everywhere, including where it can have its greatest impact, in schools. In 2021, President Biden signed Executive Order 14021, guaranteeing an educational environment free from discrimination on the basis of sex, including sexual orientation or gender identity. This executive order provides students protection from any harassment or discrimination based on gender identity or sexual orientation in a learning environment. Unfortunately, in January, the current President Trump rescinded that order, opening students up to the potential for discrimination. This order is an example of the current administration's view on gender identity as an ideology rather than a reality most people face. During one of our interviews with Rachel, who works at the Marina Library, was able to give us her insight on the changes to LGBTQ learning in schools and how she felt about it being a librarian. So I know you kind of touched on a few other things within the administration, and I know that you work at the Marina Library. What are your thoughts on just the banning of LGBTQ learning in schools?
Thank you for asking. That's something that is incredibly worrying for me as well. It's an attempt to erase transgender people and queer people more broadly from existence. There's banning any teaching of gender, essentially, banning teachers from referring to students by different pronouns than what they were assigned at birth. It's scary. I imagine they're coming after transgender teachers. They're coming after queer teachers. I work at a library. I'm a visibly transgender woman, and just on the merits of them coming after teachers is scary. They want to raise a generation that does not know about transgender people beyond bigotry, beyond hatred, beyond what they've been told by what lies they've been told by the administration and their supporters. And I feel like it's only a matter of time before, given the opportunity, before they come after me as well. Being a transgender woman who works with children, they say that transgender people are groomers, that they're abusing children. It's all slanderous lies. It's absurd on the face of it.
The Pew Research Center studied K-12 classrooms to determine what students and teachers knew about the topics related to race and gender, how they feel about discussing them, and the teacher's capability to teach these topics in class. Teachers across the board, from elementary school to middle school to high school, feel students should be taught that one's gender identity cannot be different from what they are assigned at birth, and their gender identity is not determined at birth. Despite the belief from educators, discussion about gender identity in classrooms are highly restricted, and as a result, only 29% of students feel comfortable discussing issues related to gender and sexual identity. The disparity between what educators think is essential to teach and what students feel comfortable learning about relates to a larger issue between our schools and the government. 71% of teachers feel that they do not have enough say in what is taught in their classrooms, that the government maintains the majority say in what is taught, and that 58% of teachers believe that the state has too much influence on these topics they teach. So even though teachers believe that having these conversations regarding gender identity in classrooms have a positive impact, in most cases they are not able to. Despite this belief of the government overreaching towards teachers, the majority of parents, along with the federal government, believe they do not have enough influence. But it is not like students don't know what gender identity is. The internet and social media has brought a wealth of information to the fingertips of everyone. Removing the discussion of LGBTQ plus people and issues in schools isn't going to keep children from learning what it is eventually. In an essay about LGBTQ plus inclusive learning, Isabella Lang says when it comes to students, the only comments were, "I don't understand why that happened," or "why that was wrong." They don't get the part about LGBTQ discrimination and oppression, but they do get the part about acceptance. Ignorance and hate are the things that are learned. Humans can be very empathetic towards people and understand them, even if they are not the same as us. Fostering acceptance begins in schools, and unfortunately, teachers face considerable pushback from parents when they make attempts to bring these topics to the classrooms. The results of not educating students will be more ignorant people and the ultimate removal of safe space for trans and queer individuals. And here's Michael with information on the military ban.
On July 26 in 2017, President Trump, through a series of tweets, announced that he was issuing a ban preventing transgender people from signing up to join the military, as well as preventing any active members from continuing to serve. While his tweet stated he consulted with his generals and military experts, the Pentagon stated that it was caught off guard and not aware of any such ban. The Supreme Court at the time allowed him to move forward with this ban. However, under the Biden administration, the ban was lifted without noticeable resistance from the Supreme Court. Fast forwarding to January 27th, 2025, at the beginning of his second term, Trump signed an executive order titled Prioritizing Military Excellence and Readiness. This order is a reinstatement of his previous order banning transgender people from enlisting and continuing to serve. On March 18th, Washington, D.C. District Judge Anna Reyes blocked enforcement of Trump's executive order, saying it violated people's constitutional rights. On the same day, a New Jersey federal judge blocked the ban as it pertains to two specific members, citing that they are likely to prevail on equal protection grounds by showing they have been singled out due to their sex, and the defendants cannot justify the differential treatment, as well as the pair have shown their separation would cause lasting damage to their careers and reputations.
The military ban was something that a dear friend of Rachel, our interviewee, was affected by. She will now tell us about that story.
I will say there are a lot of fears. I've had a lot of anxiety. At the start of this administration, there was an executive order, I believe, banning transgender people from serving in the military. A court has stopped that order, but I don't think this administration cares for the rule of law. I have a friend who serves in the military, and he's one of the litigants in the lawsuit against the Trump administration. I'm really hoping that he succeeds. And that issue, the ban from the military, is just a small portion of it.
On March 27th of 2025, a third judge issued an immediate block on the ban. Throughout this ongoing battle, several lawsuits have been filed challenging the administration's decision to ban all transgender service members. Human rights agencies have been working to represent these individuals and do what they can to challenge the decision in any way they can. On February 19th of 2025, the Human Rights Campaign, along with Lambda Legal, a foundation focused on LGBTQ+ issues, asked the court to block the implementation of the executive order. 1 month later, on March 19th, the Human Rights Campaign and Lambda Legal went to court in Tacoma, Washington to urge the district to block the enforcement. On April 20th, Trump asked the Supreme Court to allow his administration to enforce the ban. Not much has been heard since Trump asked the Supreme Court to uphold his administration ban. And now we have Sarah, who is going to talk about healthcare.
Of the many issues transgender people have to navigate in their lives, access to appropriate healthcare is full of obstacles and remains out of reach for many. Societal misconceptions of what healthcare looks like and government policies inject themselves into and limit decisions that should be made between a doctor and their patients. So what does healthcare for a transgender person look like? The first thing we need to understand is when we talk about transgender healthcare, we are not just talking about someone's decision to transition. Whether it's starting hormone replacement therapy or receiving gender-affirming operations, we're also talking about day-to-day care, routine physicals, mental health services, and even emergency medical treatment. In a survey conducted by the National Center for Transgender Equality, 23% of those who responded stated that fear of mistreatment at a doctor's office kept them from seeking care. This mistreatment can range from blatant disregard to a lack of knowledge of what transgender healthcare is. In some instances, individuals have been told issues as common as an astigmatism were the result of taking hormones despite having the issue prior to transitioning. 2023 marked a significant uptick in anti-trans bills, specifically in bills targeting access to gender-affirming care, with 35 having been introduced in 2022 to 185 being introduced in 2023, marking a roughly 430% change in just 1 year. Most of these bills seek to ban gender-affirming care for minors, criminalize providers, and charge parents with child abuse. In the United States, there are currently 27 states that have placed restrictions on providing gender-affirming care for minors, with 24 of them pursuing legal action against practitioners who provide general care to minors. This accounts for roughly 40% of transgender youths in America ages 13 to 17. However, transgender individuals are not the only people who receive gender-affirming care. A study performed by the Harvard School of Public Health found that 97% of gender-affirming surgeries performed on minors happen on cisgender male teens, and that gender-affirming surgeries are rarely performed on transgender minors. In most cases, gender-affirming care for transgender minors takes the form of using puberty blockers and taking hormones that align with their gender identity, as well as non-medical related changes to reaffirm their identity, such as hairstyles, clothing, and using their preferred bathroom. While there are still many obstacles the transgender community faces in regard to healthcare, California seems to be leading the way with accessibility to gender-affirming care. What was once a near impossible path to navigate, after an interview with Rachel Holder, we learned about the accessibility she received and her transition process. She went through Planned Parenthood and explained to them how she was transgender and was seeking gender-affirming care. Her journey started there and she never looked back. Let's listen to what she had to say about her experience.
I'll say for most of the time that I might have otherwise wanted to transition prior to when I did, the process to getting access to hormones was difficult. It is across the country. I wasn't pursuing hormones at the time, but I know that when I did transition, it was what is the term for it? Informed consent model, which is you can go into the clinic. I went to Planned Parenthood. I told them I want to start on estrogen. I'm transgender. I want to start on hormones. And they got me an appointment with a psychiatrist. A week later, I had a phone appointment with her. I said that I am transgender. This is what I want. She asked me a few questions, and I got a prescription for hormones that I filled the next day. That's not the case in a lot of places. A lot of places you need letters from psychiatrists, from therapists, saying that this person is transgender, they've tried living as a woman for some duration of time, and now they should be started on hormones. There used to be significant barriers in the state of California. There are significant barriers in other states, and the reduction of those barriers has been a significant part of what helped me to decide to take that first step.
While Rachel is a positive example of a positive transition process, this is not the case for all transgender people in California or across the United States. We still have a lot of work to do in order to bring fair and accessible healthcare. The struggles faced by the transgender community is a large factor regarding mental health. Megan will tell us more about this.
Hello, my name is Megan and I will be speaking about mental health. Mental health care is important for everyone, but especially marginalized communities that need the extra support. This is why transgender people need not only understanding but also resources. During Donald Trump's second run for office, PBS states that Donald Trump has made his opposition to transgender rights central to his closing argument before Election Day, using demeaning language and misrepresentations to paint an exceedingly narrow slice of the U.S. population as a threat to national identity. Many conservatives argue that being transgender is a mental illness and should be treated as such. From Oklahoma to Kansas, lawmakers are trying to pass policy that restricts gender-affirming care and treats being transgender as something to be remedied and eradicated. Transgender non-binary people are more burdened by poor mental health because of the lack of social support and increased shame and intolerance. The best way to support mental health for the transgender population is by supporting transitioning through gender-affirming care, therapy, and family and school support according to Mental Health America. Without these important aspects, transgender people will continue to suffer and not get the needed support to live a happy and healthy life. We will now hear from Athena, who will tell us of her harrowing experience with her parents when they sent her to a mental health hospital for being transgender.
More so from, I would say, my parents. I was always told growing up that I'd be treated differently or treated differently or treated unfairly because of my identity by them. But unfortunately, a lot of the really impactful, negative things that have happened to me have come from them. Most notably was the fact that when they found out I was transitioning initially back in 2020, 2019, they actually kicked me out of the house and they kicked me out of the house and said, if you want to come back, you have to self-admit to a behavioral health hospital inpatient program. So
Wow.
yeah, so I was there for about a month between there and another facility, and they didn't allow me to have my prescription hormones.
Oh no.
So that led to a lot of other negative health issues, and so it was just really weird. Just I wouldn't say I was fully a vegetable, but I felt like a zombie for the next 7 months after I left. And even after that, when I was still in recovery, it was just I couldn't even consider myself to be safely queer in that environment because I didn't want that to happen again.
Trans individuals face many challenges, from seeking acceptance from family and friends to navigating safety concerns to fighting for the freedom to express their gender identity. On top of that, they face additional challenges with laws and policies that affect nearly every aspect of their lives. So I'll be focusing on anti-trans legislation. To help ground this conversation in lived experience, I had the pleasure of interviewing Elmaya Saravia, a non-binary lawyer who began their transition in 2023.
My name's Elmaya Saravia. I guess my pronouns are she, her, they, them is fine. I'm an attorney. I do immigration, family, and estate planning. I'm located in Arlington, Massachusetts, and I started Saravia Law about 3 years ago. Well, 3.5 at this point. Just focused on growing my firm here in Arlington and just discovering my gender identity. And just trying to be positive in this crazy world we're living in right now.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Elmaya. So I'm going to go into some questions. How are policy changes within the new administration affecting the LGBTQ plus community, the transgender community, the non-binary community?
It's changing a lot. I was blessed to have updated all my documents before the administration. So my passport says X, my driver's license say X. There's so many laws going into place that are eradicating and queer people, and people see that as saving the US. And we live in a country where it's freedom of speech and everyone can be who they want to be. But now we're being told accept this. You can't do that. You have freedom of speech, but this doesn't count.
Right. And as you know, in order for trans people to live out their lives peacefully, they must have access to gender-affirming care. But in our current political climate, it's becoming nearly impossible for trans people to gain access to the care they need. As of August 2024, about 39% of trans youth aged 13 to 17 were living in the 26 states that have bans on gender-affirming care. Also, 10 states have enacted policies that prohibit transgender healthcare through Medicaid. So there are trans people who don't have access to the care they need if they receive their health coverage through Medicaid.
When you transition, that's a big deal. And when you start taking hormones, for those resources to not be available anymore because someone refuses to, they don't have to agree with you, but they're denying your existence. So that's physically, I can't imagine how hard that must be on the person's body. They're not receiving what they're, those hormones.
And according to the 2025 Anti-Trans Bill Tracker, there are currently 876 anti-trans bills across 49 states, with 93 already passed. This isn't just a policy disagreement. This is a direct threat to basic human rights. Trans people deserve to live with dignity, safety, and access to healthcare. Back in March of this year, Idaho Governor Brad Little signed 2 bills into law that limit the rights of transgender people. One of them, House Bill 500, prohibits trans athletes from participating in any athletic team, whether that be a high school team, club athletic team, or any team a part of a public institution of higher education, including those that are members of the National Collegiate Athletic Association, otherwise known as the NCAA. This law now makes it nearly impossible for trans youth and trans people to participate in something so ingrained in American culture, sports. The consequences of this law are without a doubt detrimental. A trans student, for example, may suffer serious emotional and physical distress when excluded from communities and spaces they enjoy participating in. Brad Little also signed House Bill 509 into law, which prohibits trans people from obtaining a new birth certificate with their gender identity on it. And on a national level, on his first day in office, Trump signed an executive order barring citizens from updating the sex designation on their passports. Many trans and non-binary individuals opened up about their newly issued passports being marked with their sex assigned at birth rather than the sex they put down on their application. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's illegal. It's not just illegal, but it's wrong. We're living in a time where the law is being not just ignored, but just they're just pretending it doesn't exist. That's not what the US is. The US has always been grounded in law. And to have the other side say, this person doesn't count, this person doesn't count, it's not just un-American or unpatriotic, it's just morally it's wrong. You can't just treat someone differently when we have these laws set.
The bottom line is, anti-trans bills, laws, and policies deny transgender people's humanity and existence. Through legislation and censorship, these actions send the message to the masses that trans lives do not matter. The LGBTQ+ community has historically been denied basic human rights, the freedom to love who they love without persecution, to express their gender, to have access to healthcare, or to simply live without fear. These new laws and acts attempt to justify the oppression of trans individuals. However, they are rooted in nothing more than hatred.
I know it's a distraction because eggs aren't coming down. There's all these other things that aren't happening, but everyone just wants to deny the existence of queer people.
If our elected representatives are choosing to pass laws that restrict how people can express and live out their gender, then those decisions affect all of us.
During one of our interviews, our interviewee Rachel spoke about a time someone was transphobic to her at her job and how her community stepped up and spoke up for her. We will now hear about that.
I will occasionally get some bigotry, but the one instance that I can think of has been far more affirming than it has been traumatic, simply because this person was openly bigoted. He had called me with no basis, had just called me a child abuser, and entirely up the chain, up the hierarchy at my workplace, everyone agreed this isn't right. The patron was banned, and it was affirming to see that the people at my work, the people who in my community support me and are taking actions against that sort of thing.
Before we end off this podcast, I want to give the perspective of the interviewees when asked the question, how does it feel to live authentically? And here's what they had to say about that.
It feels really wonderful. I need to contrast it with the way it felt before. Living as a man, I felt that I was not leading a life worth putting an effort for, worth living for. Life was just sort of something to exist in for the next 60, 70 years maybe. Transitioning has given me just an entirely new breath of life. I feel like I have lived more in the past year and a half since I've come out than I had in the 15 years prior to that. It's been a wonderful and absolutely exhilarating experience.
It just feels like I'm not pretending to be someone else anymore. Like, just being true to your authentic self just really means like just being the person that you always imagined and wanted yourself to be when you were younger. It's just so, it could be like, the realization is just like so sudden and so impactful. You just realize one day, it's like, oh, like, this is my life now. I can't even imagine, like, I can't even remember like how things felt like before any of this happened, like 2 years ago, let alone like when I was a teenager. And just like looking back, like I just imagining myself then, like I don't recognize myself, because this is like, I would use an analogy of like a caterpillar going into its metamorphosis cocoon. It's just like, you're always meant to be like what you came out as. You just had to go through a lot in order to be there. So
While the political landscape surrounding transgender rights remains uncertain and in many cases hostile, one thing came through clearly in our interviews with community members was that it is important to live your life authentically, regardless of what others believe. Now more than ever, it is important to stand up, show up, and advocate for the protection and progress of the trans community. Trans rights are human rights, and ignoring the needs of our community members does not erase them from our community. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Rainbow Rights Podcast.